Meanwhile, as Democrats and Republicans debate over whether a physical barrier at the border would work, a former criminal defense attorney argues in favor of that wall. One America's Jack Posobiec reports.
We're very excited to welcome here to One American News former criminal defense attorney Jeffrey Marty. Now, Jeffrey, you wrote something recently this week talking about your experience dealing with people that had been coming across the border and a lot of these border issues that we've been talking about recently. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit more with you because I think it's very interesting for our audience based on your personal experiences there on the ground.
I wrote this and I didn't really think it would generate as much interest as it did. I mean, really, it was just about the costs of drug abuse and addiction throughout the nation that the border debate isn't even acknowledging. It comes down to people having very, very high back-end costs in addition to the overdose epidemic, which has doubled in the last 10 years.
So what part of border security would capture this?
When they've erected fences, 10 years ago when they did the Secure Fence Act, they did erect high fences in some places and they saw border crossings stop by about 90+%. So when they did that, that was effective. But if they do it in other places where the fences really weren't built, they were supposed to be, but they weren't, then they would stop a lot of the human trafficking or the human flows and the trafficking. It's also conducted by the same cartels. So if they do these things to stop the flows of human beings coming across, then they'll have more resources to search trucks and for technology at the ports of entry that are legitimate. To not try is to surrender. I mean, if they're going to not even bother trying and say it's too expensive, then they might as well tear down the fences we already have.
At one point, you were talking about how there's essentially a cascading effect that takes place because of the narcotics flowing across the border. What did you mean by that?
Well, in my practice, what I've seen is, and I've represented people on pretty much every drug charge you can have, including fentanyl. So they go out, they can't hold a job, they get convicted, they become felons. They have a lot of problems that end up spreading out to the community, and that was the point of this thread, was to talk about some of that, how the government steps in to solve those problems, and how they're very, very high cost. But if the drug availability was lower, how that could solve some of the problems that we're talking about right now, and the cascading effect that flows from them.
And you talked about, in a way, that some of these programs, both in the government-supported nonprofit sector, but then also in terms of the welfare state social services, it almost becomes a self-perpetuating situation.
Yes, very much so. So when drugs are the genesis of maybe 90% of my cases, I'd say at least, you have this ripple effect that goes through the entire community. It breaks down the family. People become unemployable. The children end up going into places like foster care. And when you talk about the cost of those things, then you're talking about billions and billions of dollars that aren't even accounted for. When we talk about $7 billion for a wall, I mean, that's nothing compared to the overall cost of these things.
I want to thank you very much for coming on to me today and sharing your insights. Definitely want to reach out to you again as this situation develops.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.